Thank you so much, Joseph, for joining us on a podcast at Dawdle, and nice to see your experience in gaming industry. I think this is the first time that we are interviewing somebody from the gaming industry. So why not take initial 1 minute of the time and you kind of take us through your experience so far.
Okay. So I'll try to make it very quick, but in short, I actually have more of a technical background. So I graduated with like an electrical engineering computer science degree, which is very different from what I'm doing now. But I started off working in at like Lawrence Berkeley National Labs in their distributed computing group, Cisco systems working on networking software. But I always had like a desire to start my own company and had a few sort of like entrepreneurial stints. But I guess long story short, was an engineer, then kind of shifted to management consulting. And that's where I learned a lot about business. In 2010, kind of started in gaming by first working on a social canvas game, so a game for MySpace and Facebook while I was working as a consultant, and that kind of got me into making games. It turned out that it was something that seemed like that I could do. And so I started a company in San Francisco in 2010 to raise some money and try to do a business. Was not that successful. Then went into consulting, publishing, eventually wound up around, I don't know, 2014 or 15 at a company called FunPlus, where I led the development of a game called King of Avalon, which wound up to be very successful. And then that kind of led me to working in publishing at SEGA, NBCUniversal, and for the last 5 years, I've been here at Leela. We're building a mobile extraction shooter out of Bangalore, where I think you are also based out of Rishikesh. And we're trying to do something big here. I can't hear you, Rishikesh. You're muted.
Great career altogether, Joseph. You have tested a lot of waters, kind of experimented with a lot of things. And so just curious about one thing is that is Leela, the company is based out in India, or is it registered in the US and you are operating from India?
Yeah, so I would say like if you look at most Indian startup companies, that there's generally a parent company either in Singapore or in the US, and we're very similar in that way. So we have a Delaware C Corp based out of the US. And then there's like transfer agreement and a subsidiary company here in India, but our headquarters is basically here. So we have 32 employees based here in India, and we have 8 global. So in total, we're 40, but most of our employees are here in India, which is where I am.
Got it. And since you come from a technical background, Joseph, for the sake of our audience who are, who want to understand about the gaming industry, especially the leaders, industry leaders, would like to understand from you the end-to-end game development workflow. Like, what are the different processes involved once you're building a game?
Hmm. Well, I think that differs a lot. So there isn't like a single process or a single workflow. And it depends based on platform, like whether you're developing for mobile or whether you're developing for PC. It also depends on the kind of game that you're making. So based on the genre, for example, if you have a hyper casual game, sometimes you start with nothing. You might start with a video or an ad. And if the ad performs well, then you build the game that was depicted in the ad, for example. In our case, we have a bigger development cycle. We're trying to work on a mobile extraction shooter, which is a very challenging and difficult category, both from a design perspective as well as engineering. I would say like typically what you will see is some amount of pre-production that basically tries to understand the key risks in the game and essentially tries to characterize what the game would be about, what resources required, developing a P&L and financial model for the game, things like that. Then some kind of production phase where you're developing the game, an alpha phase where you have the major features built. And from there, on the mobile side, there's something called a technical launch and soft launch, which is more specific to mobile relative to like PC. But in a technical launch, you would just launch, check your SDKs, check your data pipeline, validate that, check payments and things like that. Soft launch is where you will check your game's metrics and iterate in soft launch to get the game to a point where you feel good about the unitary economics. And then hard launch is when you open to all countries. And once you open to all countries, then you're really focused on maximizing your project economics, whatever that means to you, whether it's for profit or revenue or however, based upon your company strategy.
Absolutely. And this raises a very important topic is that for the gaming industry, it is usually very important to synchronize the global teams through advanced collaboration and communication technologies. And also to kind of this collaboration becomes very important because, if you have to launch all across the globe. So tell us about the best practices or tools or technologies that you use for mapping and managing collaboration across distributed teams.
Yeah, so I guess I would say I am a little bit contrarian. So I would say that I don't believe in remote teams for new game development, right? So when you're trying to do 0 to 1, when you're trying to make a new game, it's so difficult that I think by and large, you should try to be as centralized as possible, especially for teams that are young, where you don't have a lot of experience. And so we're here in Bangalore. We try to have everyone in office. We try to have collaboration not be done through tools or things like that, but through people being here on the ground. But when you have inexperienced people in terms of skills as well as management and leadership teams, then being distributed globally is, I would say, in most scenarios, I'm sure there's exceptions, but in most scenarios, it's a nightmare. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see so many failed new games trying that approach.
Got it. This is very insightful. So Joseph, we'll go to the next topic is that, how are you harnessing automation and AI to accelerate agile game development?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think there's a few different ways of thinking about AI. And I would also say that gaming is probably one of the last areas where AI will have as big of an impact. And so, I spend a lot of time both here in India, but also in Silicon Valley. And when I talk to a lot of my Silicon Valley friends, it seems like AI is having a much bigger impact on web based businesses. Gaming, it's not having as big of an impact. But I would say in general, the theory or the concept, we can go into the reasons for that if you want or not. But I would say in theory, there's a lot of assets that you could potentially, in theory, generate using AI. And some simple games like 2D games are doing that. I would say we're not at the point where AI is ready in terms of rigging 3D models, animation that are at a production level of quality for many more high quality games. If you're trying to make something simple, I think you might be okay. But the general case is that I would say in gaming, AI is having maybe the least impact in terms of other industries for reasons. And again, we can go into it or not. And if you look at production code, I would say that's close to zero relative to a lot of these other companies that are more web based that are, and you're hearing numbers anywhere from 30% to 90% in terms of AI generated code for those more web based kinds of companies. But I would say the promise is generated AI assets. Also, the promise is using agents so that you can reduce the number of people that you have for specific kinds of workflows that are, especially those that are very predictable in nature. So the potential to use agents, for example, there's a feature called the battle pass, which is very widely used in a lot of games. And so when you have a very fixed structure and format that's generally repeated a lot and it's very predictable, then I would say that that's a very good candidate for deploying AI against. And I also think that AI enables new kinds of capabilities. I think that when you look at where a lot of energy and effort is going right now, it's basically in NPC behaviors.
Yeah.
So being able to have NPCs that don't just have a conversation with you based upon like a dialogue tree, but more based upon using an LLM or other kind of AI technology to be able to give you a different kind of player experience. And I would say that there's so many areas where you could apply AI, but again, in gaming, it's still very early.
Got it. Got it. So you basically covered the analytics portion as well, because my next question was on that. So before I go there, I will kind of come on this important thing that, so how do you think is that the regulatory adherence and risk mitigation are integrated into the workflows while you're building it?
Regulatory, I mean, as far as I know, I don't see a lot of regulatory oversight besides, for example, like I know if you're using AI assets on Steam, I think you have to disclose that you're using those kinds of AI assets. And I also think that For right now, it does seem like player perceptions can be mixed. I would say in the PC space, it seems like there's a lot of people who get upset when you use AI in your game assets. And so that could lead to review bombing or people just kind of getting upset over that. My feeling is that in mobile, it's a little bit less, there's less kind of animosity towards the use of AI. But, I personally think that people are going to get used to it over time. And it's kind of like, I kind of liken it to online dating back in the day. Early on, everyone, like if you were using online dating early on, you were a creep, you were a weirdo, people made fun of you. But today it's like the main way of doing things. I think the wave of AI and AI generated assets is an unstoppable force in my opinion. And so at some point, the old guys that care about this or have an emotional response to this, I think it's just going to get less and less over time. But I do believe in fair use, and I do believe that creators and artists where their styles are just being ripped off, whether it's Studio Ghibli or other things. I mean, I think those things need to get figured out, and those haven't been figured out yet. So hopefully that does get resolved. But I do think that once it does, over the long term, we're going to just be seeing a lot more of those things. It's just going to happen more and more. And one way to think about it is, for example, before Roblox, there could have been a creator who had a good idea, but no way that creator could kind of make the kind of game that they wanted to. But after Roblox, an artist, a 13-year-old kid with an idea could make a top game. Look at Grow a Garden, right? It was like a single person, at least initially, and then a team kind of came in and optimized it. But like the biggest game in the world was made by essentially one person, a very young person. So I believe that's kind of what AI is enabling. It's enabling a world in which, whether it's games or books or movies, will be able to be created at a much higher velocity, much lower cost. Something that I call the shift from long vector development to short vector development. If you were to think about vector as time, cost, resources, all that kind of stuff. So we're seeing the world and entertainment products be turned into kind of a Roblox platform via AI.
Yeah. And one side question is that, Joseph, what is driving this gaming industry? Like, what is that part of consumer behavior which you think that drives the gaming industry? More and more gaming games coming out, and the industry is increasing, like, year on year. What
Yeah,
is
well,
that behavior like?
right. Well, I think like there does seem to be a fairly insatiable appetite for entertainment. And so whether that's games or movies or whatever it is, I think that, well, I think in the games, in terms of books and movies, I think people just love stories. And I think for games, something that I've talked about before is that I believe that most human beings have a latent desire for something, and that games essentially manifest that desire through playing whatever game that you're looking for, right? And so whether it's the need to conquer, loneliness, the need to see progress in your life, but there's kind of like the brain is separated into like I forget the names of it, but like the limbic system and
And yeah,
yeah, and so you've got like the monkey brain that has certain specific desires that you're not necessarily completely aware of. And so I think games help manifest and enable those inherent desires to be satisfied.
yeah. As you usually told is that, if you want to identify a personality of a person, ask him what games does he play.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I believe that. I believe it. But yeah, I think though that one other thing that's going to happen is as we see the impact of AI to creation, that should significantly reduce the cost of production across multiple entertainment categories. So whether it's games or movies or books, a lot of those forms of entertainment, the cost should drop precipitously. And so then in that kind of a world, I do think we're going to be in a world where attention and distribution become more increasingly important. So I think that's where, when we're swimming in all sorts of different kinds of content, then, and, who knows, maybe AI makes it so that we don't have to work very much. And so we have all this leisure time. So we may be in a world where we see these kinds of shifts where there's all sorts of entertainment products available, but we also have tons of time. So we'll see what happens. But I will say we're living in very interesting times, and the next couple of years are probably going to be the most dramatic and impactful in the history of this planet in terms of Earth and humankind.
And why do you say so? Because of the AI revolution or something?
Yeah. I think there's nothing like it that we've ever seen. That the advances that we're seeing, I mean, if you look at a graph of the progress of AI, it's been fairly predictable and extremely dramatic. So I think most people now can, like, a few years ago, it was, people looked at me like I was crazy when I said, I think AI is going to be bigger than the internet. Now people are just like, oh, yeah, it's going to be bigger than the internet, right? It's becoming increasingly obvious that this is a technology that's bigger than anything that we've ever had in the history of mankind.
Absolutely. Now, I will take you back to some technical stuff that we would like to discuss with you. Is that building real-time analytics pipeline for observing player behavior and engagement, insights is such an important thing for the gaming industry.
Is it?
Means I'm asking you. Yeah. So,
I think it depends. Okay, so
you're an
let me
expert. I've just done the
let,
research.
let me explain. Okay, so like I've been at companies before, and it's like, oh, we got to have all this real time data stream. And a question I would ask is why? Like, oh, because it's so important. You need all this real time data. And then I would ask, for what? Because like you want to know exactly what's going on in the game. And then I was like, okay, show me where you use real time data. And it turns out for many games, maybe there are some games where real time data is important, but for many games, having your data delayed by 24 hours is not a big deal. So I would submit to you that I'm not sure if real-time data is that important. I think in the case of like detecting fraud, detecting certain kinds of attacks on your game, things like that, sure, real-time data could be very important. But from the perspective, because I think you were leading with analytics, right? Like being able to get your analytics day even 24 hours late, I think for most use cases is fine. And I think the more important concept for a lot of game developers is to understand what is the cost benefit, right? What is your ROI for getting that real time data versus the data that might be delayed by 24 hours? Because what are you going to use it for? Like, sure, I could get, okay, here's the real time data. Okay, cool, thanks. I'm going to think about it and do some analysis in 2 days from now, right? Like, okay, so why do you need that real time data? Why are we paying 25x for this real time data? People have to really think more critically about what they need and what they're going to use it for.
What are the major cost levers, like Joseph, while you are building a gaming company? What are the major cost levers? Like one of them is the cloud cost, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like the server operating costs, server orchestration, those are some of the major costs. Like for a lot of Indian game studios, I'm not aware of anyone running their own netcode. And so like if you use a third party netcode vendor like a Photon, that will also have costs. I think even analytics, like there's some Indian studios using Amplitude, which is really expensive. And my question is, do you need all that? So this goes back to the question about real-time data, right? Oh, we're going to get the best analytics platform that we can possibly buy. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, what of that platform are you going to use? If you're not going to use it, why are you spending all this money? So that's a thing where I think that, okay, and I can't speak about other industries in India, but here in India, the number one thing I would say is that people need to be more reflective about why. Always ask why. Is this what we need? You're going to go with Amplitude? Why? What are
Yes,
you going to use in that? If you're not going to use it, then why are you paying all this money for it? Why?
absolutely.
What do you actually need? What are you actually going to use? Right? That's the question that I think like this whole concept that Elon Musk has popularized around first principles thinking, right?
Yes.
That's something where, and again, I can only speak to the Indian gaming industry. I can't speak to, there's certainly many, many unicorns and very many successful companies in tech in India. But in terms of the gaming industry, I really hope that more people, product managers, executives, leaders, founders really start thinking more about the why and from first principles, what do we actually need? What is going to give us the best return? What do we need to be successful?
Absolutely bang on, actually, Joseph. And this is not only in the gaming industry. I've seen that in multiple industries across India.
Okay.
A lot of, one of the reasons maybe, Indians are very much impulse, have an impulse buying behavior. If you see the consumer behavior in the US, it's very different as compared to, what is it in India.
No,
But
there
you're
in the U.S. there's a strong impulse behavior. You can like people are addicted to Amazon, right? Like so many houses, like you see Amazon boxes flying all over the place. So I don't know. I think the U.S. also has a strong impulsive consumer behavior too, Rishikesh.
got it. I would like to take your insights on, how, while you are scaling the gaming infrastructure, how can you optimize your cloud costs?
How can you optimize your cloud costs? Well, I would say the best way to optimize is again, like it's hard to give you a generic answer to that because so much is situational, right? But I would say like one is understanding what you need. I've worked at companies before where, for example, we stored all this data, right? And we had like, and going back to your point on analytics, even if it wasn't real time, we were storing all of this data. And then it was like, okay, well, what are you using it? And if you're not going to use it, why are you storing all of it? So I think there's the one part about just being thoughtful in terms of what you need and then managing your cost to just what you need. And then I would say the second thing is doing a more thorough evaluation as far as vendors and negotiating more. But I think Indians should know how to negotiate, right? So yeah, so like you should negotiate with all of your cloud vendors and with everybody. Like how can we get lower costs and really evaluate who's out there so that you can minimize your costs.
Yes. So the next thing is an interesting stuff is that, what role do you think emerging technologies like machine learning and edge computing play in enhancing game personalization? You have already.
Game personalization. I mean, okay, so there's a lot of different areas where it could happen. So for example, like I would say areas where it already has been used is like let's say you're playing a match 3 game. And so you're trying to personalize what level of difficulty should the player see. Like that could be one thing. So personalizing experiences in terms of like managing difficulty and complexity is one thing. I would say like a multiplayer game, if you are like we're working on a shooter, but like let's say you're in a shooter game, in a multiplayer shooter game, and you can use AI to try to predict what kind of enemy player, and for that enemy player that's being run through like ML agent type of approach or whatever using AI and machine learning to then adjust what your player experience should look like. So one would be more from like a combat or enemy player experience. One would be for like tuning difficulty and things like that. And there has been discussions, and I actually just met with somebody over the weekend that was working on the personalization of Fatui based upon ad creative. And so as you're doing like UA and you've got this ad and that ad brings in a player. So based upon the ad, how do you change the Fatui to be personalized for that player to maximize conversion retention in the game? So there's a lot of different areas that you can apply it. And I would say that it is kind of an exciting time because using machine learning or AI or LLMs in not only gaming but across every industry. I mean, we're seeing it being used all over the place, and it's still pretty early days.
Absolutely. Great. The next thing, Joseph, is that for any product-led growth, it's very important for the marketing team and the product team or the design team to work in a very coordinated fashion. And since you have led teams in big companies, tell us some secret recipes of how to make sure that there's a seamless integration between game design, development, and marketing.
I don't know if I know any secrets. So if you know any secrets, feel free to tell me. But I think the number one thing, and I mentioned before that I don't necessarily for at least for new game development 0 to 1. I strongly recommend against like remote distributed teams. And so to the point where you're talking about how do you get that integration between teams is like you just make people sit next to each other, right? So like if you have your UA manager sitting next to your live ops product manager, then I do think that that collaboration helps. Maybe there are better ways of doing it. Maybe there are other secrets that I don't know about, in which case, I'd be happy for anyone to let me know. But, I actually think that sometimes a lot of the secrets are just very simple. Like if you can do the basics well, sometimes that's what it really takes.
Absolutely. Such a great stuff. My last question is, how do you measure and improve operational efficiency in live game support and incident management processes?
Support and incident management. So customer support.
Yes.
I don't know. Like,
Because there are tools which are coming out in the market, which allows you to log in, log your incident on Slack itself, and kind of, because in gaming development, Joseph, I think
yeah,
fast resolution of, these queries are very important.
I would probably say like this would be a good area for AI to come in, right? Like I think there's been studies that have shown that AI in many cases outperforms humans in terms of customer support because they don't get mad at you and they don't like you can cuss at the AI and it's not going to get upset at least for now until it becomes super intelligent and then and then wipes out humanity. Yeah, I to be honest with you, I have not been like I'm deep in certain areas. Customer support is not an area I'm that deep in. Yeah, I actually haven't thought about it a lot.
So how do you handle the queries that come from, say, the marketing team or the business team?
Are you talking about customer support or what are you talking about? So,
Yes,
so like I would say like, so a lot of these games will, you can have like a Zendesk or a Help Shift or some of these platforms where it can take a lot of the tickets and then, there's a resolution process and a QA team that would like look at those or a customer support team that would look at those and help resolve those issues. And like, then it's just more about, the platform that you're using to track and resolve those issues, whether it's like a Jira, if hopefully it's not Jira, but if it's Jira or a Monday or a ClickUp or whatever you're using.
thank you so much, Joseph. This was insightful. In this short conversations, we kind of tried to touch upon a lot of things in the gaming industry.